I'm Diego Bancourt. I've been part of Special Olympics Florida for over 8 years. I'm an athlete leader and athlete coach, and I work as a customer service representative for an insurance broker agency. I'm also a regular user of different types of transportation, and I know how important reliable transportation is for people with intellectual disabilities. It connects us to friends and family. It allows us to hold a job or go to school. It's our ticket to inclusion. But too often, transportation networks aren't designed for us in mind. Navigating them can be confusing and frustrating. Help can be hard to find. Also, I am excited that we're here today to talk about challenges and potential solutions. Thank you for being part of this important discussion. And now I turn it over to Sherry Wheelock.
So much, Diego. And so we're really excited. It's all about acceptance and inclusion, which is a big focus for Special Olympics Florida. But I also share that all of these individuals here today really represent champions for inclusion. So we're thankful for each of you for being here with us today. And so before I introduce the panel, I'm very excited that year-round this campaign really is happening. So it's conversations around important topics. We just did one earlier this month up in Orlando around healthcare equity. And then today, obviously, it'll be transportation, which we're really excited about to be here in Miami. And then we're also doing races across the state that actually have moments where not only we fundraising, of course, and some awareness points, but really having great speakers also come out with our athletes and share some of their thoughts on how we're really supporting our athletes throughout the community. So with that, are we going to do the hype video next, or you want to do some introductions? All right, we're going to wait for the hype. All right, more hype to come. Okay, but again, we're really excited in Special Olympics Florida. So about 10 years ago, we were serving around 20,000 athletes. Fast forward, we're at almost 75,000 athletes across the state of Florida. And I share this because, yes, it's exciting and we really want to do more. But one of our biggest barriers to being able to train daily, to be able to compete on the weekends, to be able to travel even just across to county competitions is transportation. And so we're really excited to have this conversation because we've talked a lot about it throughout the last 10 years, and I think a lot of people have as well. And so I think there's been some major improvements, but there's still more to do, which we are aware of that. But we could be serving upwards of 450,000 people in the state of Florida with an intellectual or developmental disability. So we're excited to be here today because it can open up more opportunities for our athletes to compete and be part of the playing field as well as the community. So with that, I'm excited to introduce some of our panelists today, and then we'll just go ahead and jump in. So, of course, our amazing host. So thank you to Patrick Goddard, our president of Brightline, that's here today with us. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Our friend, Commissioner, you have to leave a little bit early, we heard today, so we want to make sure she is on time, but of course, a great friend to our athletes and our community, Commissioner Regalado. So thank you so much for taking the time. Eulois Cleckley is here with us as well, and I think many of the athletes and family members who have been here have already spoken to both of you today. So thank you for taking the time to answer questions. But we're excited. He's the Director and CEO of Transportation and Public Works for Miami-Dade County. So thank you very much for being here and for all your work as well. So Jen Shepard was also supportive of this event. Unfortunately, she got stuck in a lot of the airline traffic and issues that were happening this week. And so we're really excited, though, that her partner, Chris Margaronis, could be here with us from Uber today. So Chris, thank you. Of course, he made it in on the red eye, so that, just saying. No, I'm just kidding. And then awesome that we're excited to have Leslie Walker also here with us, and he's a friend to many of the athletes that are already in the audience, and has already been doing tons of work in this area of transportation for persons with intellectual disabilities, and he's here representing the best practice group. So thank you so much, Leslie, for being here. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to jump in, and Commissioner, we're starting with you. So, all right. So we just want to maybe get your perspective on why it is so important that we do create great transportation systems that effectively serve persons with intellectual disabilities, and in that regards, really what transportation means to the social inclusion that happens as a result of it in our community.
Great. Well, first and foremost, I am the proud parent of two neurodivergent adults, Isabella and Sebastian, who are now 19 and soon to be 21 respectively. When they were diagnosed 17 years ago, I ran for a position on the Miami-Dade County School Board. And one of the first issues that I had was transportation. Because I had created academies within schools, but how are they going to get to those academies? We have, as a community, changed so much. We have so many more options today than we did 15 years ago. We're actually talking about neurodiversity, which we weren't back then. We're not trying to eradicate it. We're not trying to cure it, you know. We've moved from awareness to acceptance, and I'm very excited about that. Yay! I would not change a thing about my children. They just need support. And one of the things that I ask people to consider is, in a world where we talk about gender diversity, where we talk about cultural diversity and racial diversity, to talk about intellectual diversity, you know, and really embrace that. Our neurodivergent individuals have so much to share, and they deserve a seat at the table, and bringing them to that opportunity really does make us a better community. So when I became a Miami-Dade County Commissioner, my first item was a county-wide training item for all of our departments, which included transit. So we've trained our police officers, our firefighters. We created the autism decal and registration. We trained our libraries. We actually just got an award at the National Association of Counties for our work with the libraries, and have pushed everyone towards getting sensory rooms. We are the first county to have an outdoor sensory room for our outdoor events that are sponsored by the county through Loud and Live. And really educating people on the resources needed in order to move from the lack of discrimination to inclusion. And that's important, you know, because a lot of people, when they talk about this, they're like, oh, now we're talking about autism, you know, we're not discriminating. There's a difference between the lack of discrimination and inclusion, right? Inclusion actually forces you to take a series of steps to provide accommodations. And really getting folks to understand that while there are a lot of neurodivergent people that have physical limitations, there's a different set of needs that we have for intellectual disabilities, right? That are not necessarily visible. And that's why the training is important. So UMNSU CARD is going to be doing the training for transit. So we're excited about that. We're finishing with our police officers. Not because transit wasn't a priority, but because honestly, I have so many Baker Acts and so many arrests that we really prioritize police. I say it, you know, I'm very honest about the problems that we have, right? So, and we've come a very, very long way, and I'm excited to say that Broward is now taking the body of work that we've done here in Miami-Dade County, and they are going to present it in Broward with the support of that commission. So we're doing the same for West Palm. I represent Tri-Rail. I've been on the Tri-Rail board. I'm happy to be a Brightline partner. And we're going to be also doing this work. You know, we've really been moving Tri-Rail in a different direction. It is a commuter rail, and we will be also training at Tri-Rail. So look forward to that next year as we go into Miami Central and really start changing the dynamic of transportation. Last year, through my office, we actually hired, because I believe that one of the problems that we have is the lack of data. Okay, so we are a community. We know what our problem is. Our problem is not us, right? Our problem is getting neurotypical people to understand that there's a problem, right? And that we need resources and accommodations and not their pity or pictures, right? So that's kind of like the space that we live in. I think that, you know, the key is data. So we actually hired the team that did the eviction work for the county. They did an amazing job on the eviction side in 2020 during the pandemic. We hired them to do what is called MyAbility. And it started with a survey of all the groups that do this work and a lot of individuals, and the number one issue was transit. The number one issue was transit. Now, the second issue was police and fire, and concerns about, the lack of training in police and fire. And if you were out in transit and something happened, so like I said, we focused on police and fire first and are now moving on to transit. Parks is another one that we got, so we will be also training our employees in parks. I know that that's also started. But what can we do in transit? So there's different components to it. I know Eulois is going to be talking a little bit about what we've done. Obviously, there's special transportation, right? But like I tell people, special transportation is the floor. And it is very limited by our federal requirement to have it mimic transit, right? So it is not Uber. It cannot be Uber, right? It must work with a delay, because it must mirror public transit. I cannot provide a better service on STS than I provide in public transit, right? So that's kind of, we always try to explain to people the 1 hour window, kind of this like thing that we have. We are changing the trapeze system. Everyone agrees that trapeze sucks. We agree. We are all in agreement that trapeze has...
It's not efficient.
Yeah, it's not efficient. He gets to be more diplomatic than me. But I will say this, as someone who uses STS, and my daughter's been on STS since she was 12. And my son also. And my son has transitioned to public transit, which I'm very proud of, and I'm happy to speak about that. But using it online is much better than like the calling. So if you haven't gone online, please, it's so much better. But what we're looking at is, within that, creating different opportunities for folks to work as organizations and not necessarily as single users. So that would really, really help. So we're aware of the challenges of that, but I mentioned to you that, there should be a transition from STS, to public transportation. I trained my son for 2 years in order for him to use public transit. I'm working on my daughter a lot harder, it's very, very challenging. But it should be the ultimate goal. So as much as we are here to work, on the system that we use day in and day out, I think it's important for us to set as a goal using other transit. And the key to that is training, awareness, having signage and communications for neurodivergent people. So our first step will be the training, and our second step will be the signage, and explaining it in a way that works for them. And I hope we get to talk about that.
No, that's incredible. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your personal connection with everything that helps it, bring it all home for everyone, I think. And great lead into training conversation. And so excited that Leslie's here with us. So Leslie, can you give us maybe just a little bit of a feeling of what it's like that through your trainings on how to use public transportation here in Miami, for instance?
So it can be very daunting. It can be very daunting and scary. Scary for the individual and scary for the family. Oh my, everyone thinks about, we talked about this, the worst case scenario. What could happen? What's the worst thing that could happen? And they think about that and they withdraw. I'm not gonna try this. And we have to think about something where it's just like voluntary restricted movement. I'm choosing not to go anywhere because of whatever I'm feeling, whatever anxiety, I'm choosing to not move around. And if we're not all at the table, it's just not the same thing. We all need to be sitting at the table. But training and moving around the city can be very difficult for people with disabilities. I think that the training is coming. It's coming. It's just a matter of time, I think, and a matter of people and volunteers and manpower to do it. My experience with training people with disabilities on how to get around the city is that I see a lot of the cues, different types of cues are needed, I think. The visual cues, the auditory cues, different ways to remember, to help retain things in the short-term memory and how to get where I was and things like that. I also see a lot of ambassadors downtown that are doing things because we live in a tourist industry. It'd be great if the ambassadors were also be able to help people with public transportation and trained in this type of way as well. But it's a daunting task and a task that I know that we can take on and we will take on and we will be successful in as long as we just keep going at it. It's something that is going to take a lot of manpower. It's going to take a lot of manpower. In my program, what we used a few volunteers, and we had small groups, and the training was ongoing. Some people could afford to be in one session, but really if you stay in for 3 to 5 to 6, you'll learn more and more and more, and the scaffolding just helps a lot. So we would get on the stop, go a little bit further, go a little further, recognizing stops, taking pictures of where you are, taking selfies, taking videos, anything to help retain that memory of where you are to get back. And we also had people situated at faraway stops to just be safety nets if someone got off on the wrong stop. The technology as well, learning how to understand how to use the apps in advance. We need more training in the schools at an earlier stage on how to get around. Presentations by public transportation in the schools, doing field trips and getting that started earlier and helping the parents feel more at ease about the fact that this is very possible. This is possible, and we all have to be seated at the table.
That's great.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And back to the commissioner, I think you've talked a little bit about this, but could you, for the group, describe really what paratransit systems generally look like, either here in Miami or in other cities that you've seen?
Sure. So paratransit is a child of the ADA, right? So because public transit could not accommodate the American with Disabilities Act, paratransit was created, and that's why it must be an exact mirror. So if you have to wait an hour and a half for the bus, you have to wait an hour and a half for paratransit, right? It is an accommodation. And that's why it is a shared ride, and it cannot be an individual ride. That's why it has to be booked a certain amount of time, before, and it can't be immediate. It has no limitations on where to take you, because we're supposed to have a county-wide transit system, right? So it can take you anywhere, and we actually subsidize the difference. So that's how the county gets involved in the price point, and how it works. You can start using paratransit at 12 years old, and I beg people to sign up. Once you are approved for paratransit, that STS card allows you a free ride on transit. So that's why I say that it's the floor, right? This is kind of where you start understanding transportation, and then you can use, public transit. The folks that are in paratransit have received training. The last time that we negotiated the contract, that was one of the things that we required, is that they receive training on neurodiversity. But like every industry in Miami-Dade County, they have issues retaining their personnel. So they have a lot of turnover, they have a lot of competition, and it's very difficult to keep people and to keep them in those routes. And those routes change all the time, right? Because everybody can go in every day and change it, and it adds to it. So it does have its limitations. And what we're doing now is training transit, personnel, so that they understand neurodiversity and they could help someone. And another thing that we're going to talk about, we have it at the airport. I'm actually on my way to the airport after this. That's why I have to leave early, because we have Easter seals coming to the airport. But we have the sunflower lanyards that we use at the airport. And one of the things that we're looking at is if people would be interested in using them in transit. So I don't know if you know about the sunflower lanyard, but it's for intellectual disabilities. It's just a lanyard that has sunflowers on it, but we train people to recognize it, right? So a lot of folks do not disclose, and you can't, there's no way to tell if someone has an intellectual disability. So that's one of the first steps that we tell, caregivers, like, hey, this might give you a little bit of comfort. There'll be, the people will be trained to kind of look for it. That's what we do at the airport. So, and it's free. You can, we can give it to you for free. But these are different things, that we can start using in transit that make it a little bit easier. So that's basically how paratransit works.
Thank you. And back over to Leslie, staying on public transportation. So setting aside the question of accessibility, what is the service generally like for paratransit, and to be able to use that?
So from a lot of studies I've read, that the #1 method of transportation for people with disabilities is actually walking. And with walking, you're not gonna, it's great exercise, I agree, but you really need to get a little bit further using public transportation or some type of ride-sharing service. So it's really, can I have the question one more time?
Sure. Well, what is the service like generally, public transportation, from your perspective with working with our folks from intellectual disabilities?
So I think that there's a lot of room for improvement, but it's great, but it's noisy for people with disabilities. It's crowded. It's not the ideal environment for travel at times. It can be late or it can be early. It can be convenient or not. And it takes a lot of flexibility. It takes a lot of flexibility on the behalf of the rider and whoever's training. It's very unpredictable. And that is something that we like some predictability, or we all like some predictability and order in our lives. And without that, we can be thrown off a little bit. And that can be a daunting task and help us and keep us inside because, I don't want to go out because this might happen or that might happen or this might happen, or I'm going to be late. Also, too, finance and money takes a big role in it as well. If I can afford to take an Uber, then I'm in a lot better situation. If I have to take public transportation, it might be a lot more difficult and harder if I don't have the training to do it. So public transportation is a necessary thing in Miami-Dade County. We have to use it. We can't get around it. And we have to continue on with our trainings.
Oh, that's some great insights. Thank you. And kind of following on the support conversation that Raquel had mentioned earlier, Eulois, are there support services available to assist the individuals with intellectual disabilities that are using public transportation today here?
Sure, and this is a great conversation. I appreciate it, and Commissioner Regalado has been a fantastic supporter of transit and STS. I think she made mention of what we have to do first, which is really train our staff. Our SCS service provider is already trained, but not only the operator, but also the attendant that's providing that type of support and ensuring that they're interacting properly with our customer. I'm excited about the opportunity to train our regular just bus operators throughout our system. And just to give greater context, we went through a whole revamp of our bus service. We have about 80 million plus passengers per year. 70% of those passengers actually take our Metro bus service. And so that's really the workhorse of our transit service throughout the county, and we continue to see increases in overall ridership. On STS, we have 37,000 members as a part of STS, but we provide 5,000 rides per day. So we have the 16th largest paratransit service here in the country. So we're always looking at ways to make the service better. It starts with training, and it starts with potentially other wraparound services that we want to provide. I do want to let everybody know that we've actually stood up a new group called Transit Connections. This is an engagement group. Since I've started with the department, I think we do an okay job in trying to communicate, but we can always be better. And how you be better is to actually have direct customer service and engagement with our customers. And we stood up this group called Transit Connections for the sole purposes of actually going out and talking to different groups across the county, different organizations, and individual customers. And this is something new we just stood up in the past month. And I took some of my staff from our Easy Card Services group to actually create this engagement group, and I can share that information as well. I think that's another layer of how we can communicate better, how we can learn and get feedback and make our system much more efficient as we move forward.
That's great, thank you. And you mentioned communication, and that's super key to
key.
Improvement, and data and honesty.
Yes.
So yes, all of those great values. Yeah. So we're going to jump over to ride sharing at this time, and I'm going to send this question to Chris. So thank you again, Chris, for being with us. But many of our athletes, parents, and families have shared the ability to book rides for their family members with intellectual disability. They're able to pay for the fees and track the route, and that's really become a game changer for all of us. It gives greater independence, of course, for our athletes. So we were just wondering, could you share any additional developments that you feel would benefit our community?
I think, thank you for having me. I think echoing what Eulois and Commissioner Regalado had said really communication is key and giving feedback is key. David, when he walked in, told me that the Uber dropped him off at the corner instead of at the address here. And that kind of feedback really helps us improve the service. And if the folks at Brightline want to make this address have a stop right in front of the door instead of at the corner, our team can work to fix those things.
Dropped me off in the corner.
Yeah.
And the address hit in the middle of the corner.
Yeah. So we can work to do these small tweaks with engagement from the community and the people who take the service to improve it. The technology that you talked about, being able to book rides on behalf of someone who needs a ride as a caregiver or a parent or a friend, you get to be able to track them and make sure that they're getting to their destination safely. You can pay for their ride. You and I talked about, being concerned about the worst case scenario. And I think we need to do a better job about partnering locally to talk about how we really do a good job on safety. 99.9% of all trips on Uber arrive safely. There are incidents and we need to continue to get better. But it's important to get your feedback so that we know how to best serve your needs, because each one of you has your own unique need, and we can improve our service by hearing from you more.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, your drivers, I think many are contractors, right? So that must be some challenges of training, and how does that work? Maybe a little bit more on working with the contractors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at the end of the day, a high quality level of service is the most important thing, and regardless of employment status, we need to do our best. And what we're working to do here in Miami-Dade County and Broward County is partner with the public sector. The public sector provides the core transportation network. Eulois and his team and Commissioner Regalado and also the folks at Brightline, we work with all of these folks to fill in some gaps where we can help support their service, but they are the mainline services, and we're really just a great partner to be able to fill some gaps when they need some help. So in some of our transit agency partnerships where we do support paratransit services, sometimes a rider is waiting for a really long time, and an agency like in Denver or Washington, D.C., they can call manually on a back-end system a ride for that person who's stranded because the dedicated service either missed them or is delayed. And in the notes, oftentimes the call center person will type in, this passenger is hearing impaired, make sure to be aware. And so I think continuing to communicate and over-communicate the needs of the passenger to make sure that the drivers are aware of that is really important. And I think, again, hearing from you all about what is the most value and what is the best thing that we can do to improve our technology and our service is critical. So, happy to hear, and we can keep doing more things like that with the right, team here to talk about it.
I'm going to jump in. So it only took 16 years, but the state of Florida now allows you, when you get a state of Florida issued ID or driver's license, to put your disability on there. So we actually tried to do it many, many times, and it was vetoed, and it finally passed. For us, it is life-changing, because even though there are organizations that do ID cards, we needed a state ID that stated the disability, right? Because if not, anybody could forge that and anybody could do it. My daughter cannot use rideshare, but my son can. And I have an account for him within my account. And I tell the driver that he's in the autism spectrum. And sometimes they drop, and sometimes they don't, but that's okay, because I rather that they know, right? I'm all for disclosure. If you are scared of an autistic person, I do not want you driving mine, right? So if that means I have to wait an extra 5 minutes, I'm good at that. I'm all good. So I actually put it in the notes. I'm just like, by the way, Sebastian is in the autism spectrum, and just because I don't know what they know about autism. That's kind of like what you're exposing yourself to. So if they have had a negative experience, or if they don't have enough exposure, but since they're contractors, I just don't, I don't want to have to deal with the problem. So I just over disclose, because I think that we're in a place where we can over disclose, and I use autism because a lot of people, I wish more people knew neurodiversity. But most people know what autism is, at this point. And you'll be surprised. Some drivers will respond and be like, "Oh, my nephew is autistic," or they'll ask you questions like, "Oh, does this person hit themselves, or do they this or that?" I'm happy to answer, happy to answer all those questions. So, I mean, I think, you know, now that you can put it on the ID card, it opens a door to these other like automatic disclosures. I agree with you. I mean, if I can say I want a quiet ride, I should also be able to say I have an intellectual disability, right? But you know, I just over disclose.
So Uber drivers have to go through a background check, they have a vehicle check, and they have a non-discrimination policy that they have to review and acknowledge. But training for folks who need extra assistance, there isn't any training, and that's, you know, talking about people who need that extra care. The public service that the county provides, if you're concerned about whether your passenger is going to be okay and maybe they need that extra level of care, the best service for them is leveraging, you know, the public agency dedicated service. We do have something called Uber Assist that is coming to Miami, where those drivers have gone through a training and they do door-to-door service, but it is not here yet. But it is something that we're prioritizing because we understand that there is a need.
Yep. And we're gonna take more questions a little bit later, so we definitely want to answer your questions, but I want to keep rolling a little bit here before people have to move on. So I'm very excited again to be here at Brightline, a very amazing addition to our community. And so we really wanted to start, Patrick, with you and just kind of sharing, you know, how are you working with groups that help individuals with intellectual but also physical disabilities, kind of like who you're working with and what that look like right now for Brightline.
So, well, first of all, welcome to our office. It's great to have everybody here with us. And I think we're very grateful to be part of this conversation. Brightline is really about creating not just the commodity of transportation, but creating an experience around that. And part of developing that experience is ensuring that we are tailoring that experience to the needs of the customers that we have. And from the get-go, we really prioritized, you know, from a physical disability perspective, all of the sort of ADA requirements so people could get into the station, get up to the platform, get on board the train, get into the bathrooms, operate in the bathrooms, and do all of those very basic things that, you know, everybody should be able to do without stress or hassle. Brightline is also a reserved system, so similar to Uber, you can book yourself or you can book on behalf of someone else. You're able to buy them their ticket, you know, and use some of these other services like STS or Uber to get to the station and get picked up at the other end. And I think once people get on board, they feel pretty secure. You know, we don't have a lot of stops. It isn't as crowded. There isn't standing room. So it is a little bit of a different environment than public transit. So we're continuing to focus on how can we enhance that experience. Obviously, the digital experience is now very important. So providing people with the tools they need inside our app and on our website to be able to navigate our booking systems and reserve independently is something that we're continuing to focus on. We've done a lot of work on that over the last couple of years. Obviously, the web and app is ADA compliant, but I think that there's more that we can do there. And then I think collectively, I think what we're talking about here is how can we create more understanding and more acceptance, because I think there is a gap in terms of education for people, and I would include our own teammates in that. You know, we've brought on some teammates who are neurodivergent. We've worked with Des Moines and Best Buddies and so on to bring teammates into our organization, and we have several of our hospitality attendants in the stations from those organizations. And I think that has fostered a much deeper understanding from other teammates in the station. And I think it's also, highlighted a need for us to do more to educate anybody who's interacting with the public that works in our stations or on board our trains to be able to interface appropriately with people who might be neurodivergent or may have special needs.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we see many of the employers who have our athletes as part of their team seem to have much better guest service, you know,
Right.
overall. And you were just saying like that's really critical is guest service for a business, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to understand, to your point, who you're serving.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
Great.
we had your group back in May, about 180 folks back in May, and you know, I think it was a good example of how how the service can work and how easy it is. And I think that, as many of the panelists have said, sometimes it is just about, you've got that perception, that fear before you try and do something. And I think for us to be able to do that event back in May was an opportunity for us to demonstrate how easy it is so that people could think about that as an option for themselves in the future.
That's right. And I shared last night, our unified team from Inter Miami with Special Olympics took it last night to Orlando to catch a flight out. So otherwise they wouldn't have made it to their destination. So very cool. And I know, Commissioner, you need to step out.
Yes,
so anything else you wanted
really,
to share?
Really quick.
Okay.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
I will tell you, one of the things that we have to do is normalize transit, okay? We spend so much time when our kids are younger obsessing about potty training. We've all been there. But we need to normalize transit. And I will tell you what I did. I used to take my kids to the Gold Coast Rail Museum and make them ride the trains because I wanted them to understand what transit was. So that's what they did when they were very little. Then when they were a little bit bigger, I took them on the Metro Mover. And we spun and spun and spun and spun and spun and spun, until they got used to the Metro Mover. Then Brightline came, and I actually would take them on the Polar Express, which they loved. My kids loved the Polar Express, so much fun. And then they got to ride the Brightline, and they got to ride Tri-Rail. And I started that at a very young age, acclimating them to this concept of public transit, and the same thing with ride shares, acclimating them. My daughter at 12 years old, they were on STS, and people were horrified, like, oh my God, you're putting a baby on STS. She's not a baby. She's not a baby. She's a grown-up, and movement and access is important for her. So I will tell you that I did drive behind the STS car like a psycho for over a year. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, thankfully now, ride shares have cameras and stuff, and they have videos. So I mean, I don't say that I put my kids on public transit and walked away. I was stalking them the entire time, and when I trained Sebastian to use the Metro Rail, I mean, I was one car behind in sunglasses, when I told him he was going alone. He was not alone. And in the case of Sebastian also, and then Isabella, I got them the Angel, now I just air tag them, but I got them the Angel back then before we had the air tag. So I've been, helicoptering these kids for a very, very long time, so I'm not telling you to just put them out there. But it took me 2 years to train Sebastian to use public transit. He walks from our house to the Metro Rail station in Grove Central. He takes it to Dadeland. He gets on the 104 and he gets to Miami-Dade Kendall campus. The only thing, I think now when we train employees, it'll be a lot better, although I have found everyone to be very thoughtful. But I will warn you that the biggest challenge that I've had, training my son now to use public transit has been interactions with other people, interactions with homeless people, interactions with panhandlers, interactions with the chickens. We have Metro Rail chickens. Yeah, you got to tell your kids about the chicken. They're outside, but they're still, the Metro Rail chickens are a weird thing. So these are, these are things, right, that you have to educate them about. So, and now we have this tri-county system, and now we have one ticket, tri-county that we're working on. So there is a tremendous amount of opportunity, and they need to use public transit. So I can tell you that as a policymaker, we're working, diligently to provide more inclusion. Eulois is a wonderful partner, and I will say this last thing, before I go. Also consider using our trails. I am, in my district we have the Underline, which we're super excited about. It's such a wonderful opportunity. If you also, we talk about walking, where they walk and what that looks like is also important. So if you can get them used to walking around transit, instead of taking them to a park, take them to a trail, take them, to the Underline so they can see transit, so they can get used to the noise. One of the things that we do when we train our police is we tell them not to ask them to take off their headphones, not to force them to take off the noise canceling buds, because it's hard for them, to talk to us without that. The same thing will happen on the transit side. So it's perfectly okay, to use public transit. it and wear noise canceling headphones. I want to sometimes too. So there are accommodations, within that. Just yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, no, and the thing with the train safety, I mean, is huge. Like I taught my kids about how fast it goes. We watched it go by. You got to educate them, on the dangers of it and have them understand it. But this is all part of growing up, right? This is all part of adulting, and we shouldn't be scared of that. Bad things can happen anywhere. They can happen in your living room, they can happen walking outside the street, they can happen in a park. Don't let fear prevent you from allowing the neurodivergent person that you love to become a full adult, because that's not fair. And we would be fearful even if they were neurotypical, so don't lie to yourself. You would be freaking out no matter what. My father still calls me at 7 o'clock. He lives 2 doors down from me, and he checks in on me to make sure I'm home. And I'm a neurotypical 50-year-old woman. So I leave you with that.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner. Thank you. That's great. That's awesome. And stepping back just a little bit, more of a comprehensive look, maybe Patrick and Chris, you can share a little bit more from your internal insights as to what is really Brightline and Uber doing to really change everyone's transportation, really, not just our athletes, but anybody's ability to move and transport.
Well, look, I think we are in a very interesting time right now in this region. So if you sort of zoom out and you look at, for example, the Northeast Corridor that connects New York to Philadelphia and DC, that network's been around for 50 years. It's very well developed. There's transit systems that connect to intercity passenger rail, that connect to bus systems that are supported by Uber and STS and other rideshare entities. We have a very similar region now in Florida, from South Florida into Central Florida. We're getting close to the same population. We got the same GDP output. We got the same amount of cars on the road. And we are about 50 years behind in terms of the infrastructure necessary to move all of those people around. And you experience it every day when you go out and get on I-95. Or I-4 between Tampa and Orlando, right? So we all know the pain that involves, and we need alternate modes of transportation for people. We cannot all be dependent on a car. So this isn't just about people with neurodiversity or disabilities. It's like everybody needs to find a way to find alternate means of moving around the city, or moving around the region. So I think the way we all think about it is transportation is an ecosystem. And there are different components of that ecosystem that serve different needs. You've got intercity passenger rail, which is what we do, connecting the region city to city, downtown to downtown. You've got metro rail, tri-rail, and other light rail and heavy rail, commuter rail systems that exist. And you got the express busway down at the end of Dadeland South, Sunrail up in Orlando. So these are all an ecosystem, and unfortunately today, they're not very well connected. They are not speaking to each other. It's difficult to navigate from a booking perspective and a journey planning perspective for anybody. Never mind if you have an intellectual disability. I think it's hard for anybody. So I think we are all working very collaboratively together. So with Commissioner Regalado, with Eulois, with Broward County, with Palm Beach County, with Central Florida, on how can we the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure is there. How can we do more to connect the digital infrastructure? How can we do more to connect ticketing? And how can we help people plan journeys that involve all of these different modes of travel? So I think it's a big, big opportunity. We've worked collaboratively with Uber for years now on connecting people for first and last mile. I think about 35-40% of people when they show up at Orlando station take an Uber to their final destination, and it's similar down here in South Florida. We have thousands of people who get off Metro Rail, on and off Metro Rail every day and get onto Brightline or vice versa. So it's happening and people are navigating it themselves. I think we just need to continue to do more to improve that connectivity and to educate people on how to use it and how to navigate it and how to plan their journey, how to pay for it, how to get their tickets. It's getting better, and I think that as we continue to evolve, we're working with Eulois right now on adding more commuter rail systems here. So our line goes from Miami to West Palm. We're working with Dade and Broward on something that would have 15 or 20 stops that would connect those cities as well. So it would connect all of the towns through Miami-Dade and into Broward County. That's going to improve mobility for I think, millions of people on a daily basis. So we continue to work towards more connectivity, more alternatives, and more intuitive ways to navigate the public transportation network.
Great, congratulations, that's great. And Chris,
Congratulations when we get it done,
All right.
but we're making,
Congratulations on starting.
Yeah, we're making
First step's the
progress.
hardest, yeah. So Chris, anything you want to add from Uber's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, the public agencies are the backbone of the transit system, right? And Brightline is providing an incredible service going, between major cities. Uber's really bad at moving 50 people all at once from one place going to the same exact place. That's what these rail providers and bus providers are meant to do. What we're really good at is the one-offs. Eulois has the better bus network. They just did a bus system redesign, and there was a little sort of transit desert that it was a long walk to get to the new bus station, and we were able to fill that gap for the few people who needed to get from their homes to the bus station. So we're providing that first mile to connect them into the network so that they can then take an efficient, greenhouse gas efficient, low carbon emission, traffic friendly service to get to where they need to go. And so really connecting into that network that these two gentlemen are helping design is really what our role is here. And I think Patrick touched on sort of the ticketing and technology piece. I think that's critical. We see a ton of public sector entities and private sector entities spending a huge amount of time developing their own specific sort of isolated applications that don't talk to one another. And so making or enabling those different systems to be able to talk to one another for ticketing and journey planning, I think is a really critical next step in our future.
Yeah.
That's great, yeah. And it's kind of the next question.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Eulois,
So,
you.
I mean, we're doing a lot in the transportation space in Miami-Dade County. I mean, we're very focused on making sure that we're creating a system that's safe, clean, efficient, and connected. And so we have several different types of capital programs and projects that we're working on. Patrick made mention of one, which is called our Northeast Corridor, which is to provide a commuter rail service from downtown, from here, basically, Miami Central to Aventura, with neighborhood stops in between. And it takes a partnership to deliver that project, but that's going to be a game changer to relieve traffic off of US 1 as well as 95. We have the South Dade Bus Rapid Transit Project that's going to connect Florida City to Dadeland South. That will be a project where we're building 14 iconic BRT stations. It'll be the first and the longest all battery electric bus operated BRT system in the world. And it will reduce by 30% the travel times for people from Florida City to downtown. We're looking at transit options to the western part of the county along 836 and Flagler. And we're looking at connecting downtown Miami to Miami Beach and extending our existing Metro Rail system up to the Broward County line with the expansion of Metro Rail going north, and that's called our North Corridor. So all of this is happening right now. Right? And as Patrick mentioned, we are behind. This stuff should have been done a long time ago, but we now have the partnerships to move those things forward. So I just want to make mention of that, and also make mention that we have one of the safest transit systems in the country. Okay, we've had 2 back-to-back months where we've had 0 what we call tier 1 crimes on our system. So I think there's a perception that transit, public transportation is scary. That might be the case maybe in New York. But here, we have a much safer system. I come from DC. I can tell you that I'm much safer, and I take mover and transit and rider buses all the time, and I have no issues around safety and the like. Our goal is to make sure we educate better, we communicate better, and we really inform people about the way that public transportation can get you around safely, and that's on us. And so we're committed to do that.
That's great. Yeah, and I know the commissioner was going to talk a little bit about safety concerns for persons with intellectual disabilities. So I don't know if Leslie, you wanted to share any thoughts on that.
I think that one of the first things we have to do is run an assessment. What is the reason why people aren't using public transportation? What is the trigger? We all have a trigger, whether it's something is too loud, whether it's something is annoying us, whether it's the people on the train or something like that. But what do we do to deal with our trigger? And then training people and staff to know how to deal, to be empathic enough to understand what these triggers might be, to assess them, and then be able to accommodate people based on what the triggers might be. There's not that many. Once we all kind of get a hold of them all, we train everyone to kind of identify these things among other people. And I think that will also bring a lot of data as well, and understanding like, okay, it's the sound, it's the crowd, I'm confused, I didn't get off at the right stop. Once we understand those things and pull the numbers, like Commissioner Regalado was saying, it'll help a lot of people.
That's great. And so, I mean, when we talk about communication and making sure we all are staying connected, like what is the best way, thinking about that, like Patrick or Chris, we can stay connected with you from our perspective on communicating, concerns or issues or just ideas, really,
Well, I think we're willing to engage, and we have, and obviously Ali here, that is effectively her role, is to engage with the community and determine how we can continue to curate the service and the experience in a way that is inclusive. And we recognize that there continue to be a lot of opportunities for us to do that. So to the extent that you're all willing to engage with us, we're happy, we're here, our ears are open, and we're prepared to, do what we need to, whether that's helping you conduct some of the research or, just speaking with focus groups about what we can do as it relates to our own service, or just, in terms of the broader mobility ecosystem where we can make a difference and where we can bring people together. Again, we're very tightly connected here in this South Florida region. We all work together collaboratively on a lot of different things, all the way up to West Palm Beach and into Central Florida. So there is I think, a willing group that groups like yours can engage with on a regular basis to continue to make this improve transit opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities.